the Panthers with 24 points. Von Miller was the MVP. The whole point of that work isn't just about it showing that sports are rigged. It's about showing how they script it with the news stories and the Black Lives Matter stuff and history and why Cam Newton's the quarterback of the Panthers and he was born the year that Huey P. Newton, the founder of the Black Panthers, died. He did the day after all that landed. He comes out and says, I'm a shill and making us all look stupid by saying sports are rigged. I mean, how do you defend it? How do you defend what he did?
Yeah, right.
So, do you think it's possible that
you can't defend that? No.
Do you think it's possible that Jeff C. was a shill?
Sure, absolutely. But nonetheless, I give credit where credit is due for just the amount of stuff that was out there for so many years.
The man was funny. I'll tell you that. I wanted to be Jeff C.'s friend. I wanted to be his ally. And it's just weird to me because it was a couple weeks ago I reached out to him, and then we got into it again in his chat, and he's making fun of it still. I'm like, okay, he still hasn't learned anything. Unbelievable.
Didn't see that one, but not surprised.
Yeah.
But whether he is gone or whether he's pretending to be gone, nonetheless, for a lot of us in the so-called truth community, if there is such a thing as a truth community even, because I'm questioning that these days, that, because people are there's too far and few in between, as you know very well, Zach. Just the work that's out there, it's appreciated, because there's not a lot of content creators, to be honest.
What I want to say, if Jeff C's really dead, is for all of us, I'm the same way too. Us guys, we don't like to go to the doctor and get checked up. And what I heard, I did listen to his last video where he gets off the air and he said he's having a really bad migraine. I relate. I have migraines all the time too. And I assume that someday when I die, it'll probably be from an aneurysm. And I might go prematurely as well. If he's really dead, I imagine that's what happened to him. Again, we need to take care of our health. And if we do have a problem, we probably should get a checkup here and there. So, but,
right on.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for taking my call, Zach.
Of course, man. Thanks for calling in. You have a good night.
Yeah, take care.
All right. Take care. Bye. Okay, you guys. Let's go out to Rambo. It's Rambo's time. How are you doing this evening, Rambo?
Hey, thanks again, Zach.
Of course. Thanks for being here.
Last time I talked about I briefly talked about ley lines and in regards to monoliths, and this is a very popular subject, so I did a little more on ley lines, the significance of ley lines. One ley line in particular, I just put up an article on Gematria-Effect.news. Should be up there.
I got it up. Thank you.
Yeah. It's titled The Akkadian Ley Line. There are multiple ley line earth grids, but this is one in particular, particularly significant. It's called the Akkadian Ley Line, New York, New Orleans, Sacred Sites and Monoliths. So, this is a follow-up to my previous monolith post in which I discussed the film 2001: A Space Odyssey and various monoliths that have been inspired by the monolith of 2001: A Space Odyssey. The term monoliths, such as the United Nations Secretariat building. I mentioned in my presentation how buildings such as the Secretariat building of the United Nations are built on burial grounds or maybe locations of suffering like wars, locations of death. That's very common. And this all has to do with ley line energy. The whole reason you put a cemetery, major cemeteries are put on locations of ley lines. I mean, not every cemetery is on a ley line, but usually people who are elite, very important people who have the those are the knowledge, this kind of esoteric knowledge, which is what it is. They will be buried on ley lines. Or if you have battles, very brutal battles, those battles will be prearranged to to occur on a ley line because of the knowledge of ley line energy. So ley lines will very often be locations of death and battles. In the case of the Secretariat building in New York City, is on location of former slaughterhouses. So there was a lot of animal suffering in that location. And, of course, the Pfizer headquarters is only 1 block away from there. I don't think that's a coincidence. So, I gave some other examples because of the land that the United Nations Secretariat building was built on was owned by the Rockefellers. And the Rockefellers bought that land and gave it to the United Nations because they wanted the United Nations headquarters to be on that location. And this is not unusual for the Rockefellers because, and I showed an example in my post, building adjacent to, on or adjacent to locations of death seems to be a practice. And I have an example in my post on Jekyll Island, Georgia, where the Federal Reserve Act was hatched, which is basically a coup. I have an example of the United States Congress. The power of Congress was taken into the hands of private bankers. That's what the Federal Reserve Act was. It's a coup. And on Jekyll Island, the Rockefellers built a site that you have built on that site. So the location of the where they hatched the plan for the Federal Reserve Act was most likely built on top of an Indian burial ground. They'll say, they won't admit it, they'll say it was adjacent. But I'll just read from I put this in the post, it's called a Indian Mound Rockefeller Cottage. It's a Rockefeller cottage on Jekyll Island. And this is what they say. This cottage was built by the younger brother of John D. Rockefeller, William G. Rockefeller, one of the millionaire members of the Jekyll Island Club, built about 1900. It was called Indian Mound because of its adjacency to the old Indian Mound, believed to be a burial mound of the Guale Indians of Muskogean stock, who were the last Indian inhabitants of Jekyll Island. So they're admitting that, that's where their building was built. So given their penchant for building on or adjacent to death and burial sites, it's reasonable to surmise, because you asked the question when we talked about it, like you were saying that most likely the World Trade Center Twin Towers, which were built by the Rockefellers, most likely was also on top of the burial grounds. And I said, yes, it actually was, most likely, at least adjacent. They don't always admit that they're built on top. Sometimes they'll admit that, we're next to, it was built next to the burial. But 17th and 18th century African-American burial grounds were located in Lower Manhattan at the site of the World Trade Center. Because in those days, cemeteries everything was racially segregated, including cemeteries and burial grounds. So that area was actually segregated and designated for African Americans' burials. Now, starting in 1991, some remains from the African burial ground in Lower Manhattan were exhumed. They were actually building a federal building there. And as they were building the foundation, they came across the remains, and they did an archaeological dig, and they determined that these were the remains of former slaves, and some of them were buried in the African tradition, so they hadn't even adopted the Christianity yet. And later on, that area actually, they estimated that it had around 15,000 graves, but they exhumed 419 of them, and they created the what they call the African Burial Ground National Monument. The location is 290 Broadway, New York, New York, and I showed a map just to show its proximity to the World Trade Center. this map is from Google, and it shows the distance, the walking distance from that location of the African burial ground where they exhumed those bodies to World Trade Center, and it is a 12-minute walk. And this just illustrates its proximity, just to show you that area of that way. In the past, that's what it was designated for. So it is safe to assume that the World Trade Center was built on top of the burial ground. So this is a quote from Peter Shampoo. Shampoo is spelled Champous. He's an expert on ley lines, and he says a quote: "Augmenting these series are natural and or cultural events that coalesce to create a ley. These events drill karma or memory deep into ley lines. A contemporary example of karmic hole drilled into a ley is the destruction of the World Trade Center towers along the city ley." That's Peter Shampoo. I gave a link to his YouTube channel and his website. He because so many people were interested in it, I would suggest looking into his work. And also, I brought up 55 last time when I talked about the monoliths. The monolith, which is the Millennium Hilton, which is 55 stories high, is located on 55 Church Street and reopened in 2003 on May 5th, which is 5/5. And also the UN Secretariat building is 505 feet high. That's a 55. But so it's interesting that the African Burial Ground National Monument was created on a day with 55 numerology. It was February 27th, 2006. So 2 plus 27 plus 20 plus 6 is 55. Now, this one particular ley line on which New York City and many other cities, as I'll show, rely on this. It's called the Akkadian ley line. So ley lines are Earth energy grids, and any energy that is put into a ley line permeates throughout the ley line as the ley line goes around the world. That energy. So if you do a ritual on a ley line, that ritual goes around the world on that line, not just in that location. From ancient cultures to modern times, the power of ley lines has been known, but not shared with the general public. Even if one dismisses the significance of ley lines, they cannot deny the evidence that multiple major cities have been built on the same path. This many major cities in the same straight line cannot be a coincidence. And I show a graphic there from a map of the United States. On the Akkadian ley line are United States state capitals or cities that are the biggest in their state. So Boston, the largest city and state capital of Massachusetts, New York City, the largest city in the state of New York, one of the largest cities in the world, as well as a world financial center, Trenton, the capital of New Jersey, Philadelphia, the largest city in the state of Pennsylvania and the former capital of the United States, Wilmington, the largest city in the state of Delaware, Baltimore, the largest city in the state of Maryland, Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, and a world military center, New Orleans, the largest city in the state of Louisiana, and Mexico City, the capital of the country of Mexico and one of the largest cities in the world. All these cities are in one straight line. That can't be a coincidence. I mean, if you're skeptical, even anyone skeptical about ley line energy cannot deny the significance of that many cities falling all in one straight line. Now that name, it's an informal name, but it's called the Akkadian ley line, and I'll explain how they got the name Akkadian. How the line, that specific energy grid, how it got the name Akkadian. It's called Akkadian because it runs through the region of Acadia, which was formerly French North America, a French colony that included what is modern-day state of Maine and the maritime provinces of Canada. During the French and Indian War, Acadians were forcibly removed and relocated from Acadia by British forces in what is known as the expulsion of the Acadians. It's also known as the Great Upheaval. Some dislocated Acadians eventually settled in Louisiana. Today, we have the popular term Cajun for the ethnic group that resides in the state of Louisiana. Cajun derived from the mispronunciation of the term Acadian. If you follow the straight route from the middle of Acadia around Prince Edward Island to New Orleans, Louisiana, which is the beginning and starting the beginning and end points of the Acadian relocation, you will be following the path of a ley line earth energy grid. Hence, that grid has the name the Acadian ley line. It is also important to note that there is a ley line to the west of the Acadian on which we have 4 consecutive U.S. state capitals and Canada's largest city. So you have the capital of Mississippi, the capital of Tennessee, the capital of Kentucky, the capital of Ohio, and the capital of the province of Ontario, all in one line. That's to the west of the Acadian line. So that's another ley line. Not a coincidence that many capitals are on the same line. So Pope Francis is part of this too. In 2015, Pope Francis visited the United States, and he went to 3 cities in the United States on the Acadian ley line. On September 23rd, he visited Washington, D.C. On September 25th, Pope Francis visited New York City, where he addressed the United Nations General Assembly at the site of the Monolith Secretariat Building. On the same day, September 25th, he visited the 9/11 World Trade Center Memorial, which was in the shadow of the Millennium Hilton monolith. Now, September 25th is an interesting date in Gematria, his date of the New York City visit at General Assembly and 9/11 Memorial, because when you spell out 25th September or September 25th, when you spell it out, it sums to 259, which is just like the date, 259, 25th September. That's pretty unique and pretty remarkable, but that's the date they chose. And in his speech, Pope Francis, one of the lines he said was, this place, this is at the 9/11 Memorial, this place of death became a place of life too. And when you look at the gematria...
Rambo, Roman Catholicism. Yep. Roman Catholicism equals 259.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So it makes sense why
I'm just writing that down real quick.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's a great great contribution. Absolutely. So yeah, absolutely, that's a unique date, and that date is going to come up again in this decode. So yeah, he said this place of death became a place of life too. The term place of life, it matches up with Earth grid. It's almost a super match in 3 out of 4 base ciphers. So place of life, they talk about this place. Well, this place that he's referring to is on the Earth grid. So, I mean, gematria reveals that what the ritual is a consciousness that this is on a grid. And remember, on a ley line on the Earth grid, what the ritual you're doing on that grid, the energy, the vibration you're putting into that location goes across, it goes through the entire ley line across the world. So sometimes I'll do a ritual in one place which will affect something in another place on the same ley line. So in the other part of his speech, where he says this place of death became a place of life, he also says this place of death, which sums to 71. This place of death sums to 71, and anyone who followed your work knows how relevant 71 is to the Vatican and Jesuit order. This place of death 71, the Society of Jesus 71, Knights of Columbus, which is it's a secret Catholic secret society, like a Catholic version of Freemasons. Knights of Columbus 71. Some Christians believe that the Vatican is the whore of Babylon. The whore of Babylon sums to 71. The Vatican City sums to 71. Peter, they venerate Saint Peter. Peter sums to 71. Peter in French is Pierre, which is 71. Catholic. Babylon is 71.
I know you know Catholic equals 71. You just forgot it from this list, but Catholic's another 71.
No, you know what? I actually took the screenshot and I didn't put it up there.
All the time. I do that all the time when I have a long list, so I totally know how it happens.
No, thanks for pointing it out. So Catholic is 71. I should have started with that. But yeah, so this place of death, gematria shows that these phrases are. I mean, if it's not calculated somehow, sometimes you imagine how can they possibly calculate all these things? Well, when there's a vibration, I think it comes out through the vibration, and gematria it'll manifest in gematria.
Sure.
This is just too perfect the way it matches up.
Sure.
So ABC News highlighted Pope Francis's use of the term palpable grief in reference to 9/11. Gematria explains why they highlighted that part of his speech, palpable grief, matches Osama bin Laden in 2 Bate ciphers. Is there a commercial? I thought I heard something.
Well, no. That's my phone. Somebody's messaging me on my phone. You're good. And there's not going to be any commercials tonight, apparently, unless all of a sudden they come back. Something's wrong with the system. So there shouldn't be any interruption.
All right. So the phrase palpable grief, which the ABC News chose to highlight, that the phrase that Pope Francis used at the 9/11 memorial, matches Osama bin Laden in 2 base ciphers. And most significantly is the value of 110. Palpable grief is 110. Osama bin Laden is 110. The Twin Towers were 110 stories high. The gematria of Rockefeller sums to 110. Virginia State Route 110 runs by the Pentagon, which was part of the 9/11 ritual attack. Also, the name of the ley line that Francis visited, the Acadian. Again, he visited Philadelphia and D.C., which are all on that line. The Acadian sums to 156. 9/11 is the 156th prime.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll follow the ley line south to Louisiana. There's this major New York, Louisiana, New York, New Orleans connection through this ley line. And it's important to reiterate that energy put into a ley line permeates through the ley line. So energy put in New York City will be felt all along the ley line, even in New Orleans. So, and vice versa. Any energy put in New Orleans, and New Orleans had its major, event of mass suffering after Hurricane Katrina, when you had tens of thousands of people suffering concentrated in the Superdome. And that was major ley line energy, major, that permeated throughout. So it's vice versa. It goes from New York to New Orleans and back, from New Orleans to New York, and everywhere in between and beyond. So the New Orleans Superdome has Mercedes-Benz as a corporate name. Mercedes-Benz sums to 119, establishing the New York-New Orleans Acadian line grid significance. Now consider this. The date that the Superdome was reopened after Hurricane Katrina disaster was the same date, 9 years earlier, that Pope Francis visited the 9/11 memorial. It's September 25th. There's that date again. Or 25th September, 259. That's when the Superdome in New Orleans reopened. So that's not a coincidence. That date is not a coincidence. It's important to them. But it also shows you the New Orleans connection. So this is from NOLA.com. NOLA, that's for New Orleans, Louisiana, NOLA. This is about the Superdome. They say, quote, construction crews working between the Superdome and the present-day downtown Hyatt House unearthed a collection of human bones and bits of gravestones in February 1987. Fans finally had the explanation they needed. Talking about New Orleans Saints fans. The Superdome had been built on the site of the old Girard Street Cemetery. The official story is that the Superdome is not built directly on top of a cemetery. I mean, it is suspicious that such highly important structures are, so many of them seem to be in the vicinity. Also, consider the One World Trade Center, the New World Trade Center, that's built next to the site of great suffering, the former Twin Towers. So this is, tendency, trend to build next to burial sites or sites of death, if not on top of them. So, so the official story is that the Superdome wasn't built on top, but next to the Girard Street Cemetery. So both sites hosted great suffering. So elite adepts know how to harness intense human and animal suffering, and they understand ley line energy. So it's highly unlikely that the Superdome and World Trade Centers are not built directly on burial sites, but they won't admit it, but it's unlikely. Now, here's an interesting story that in speaking of rituals, the New Orleans Saints had never in their history ever won a single playoff game. So in 2000, the year 2000, the New Orleans Saints invited a voodoo priestess, Ava K. Jones, to involve the crowd. This is before the game, a playoff game with the Rams. She involved the crowd in a stadium purification ritual from midfield. Now, this was before a playoff game with the Rams. And it turned out that the New Orleans Saints won their first playoff game in their history after that ritual. So, yes, that's interesting that the Saints actually brought her in to perform the ritual. So it may seem like just like a kind of like a pep rally, kind of like a lark to kind of get the fans going. I think there's an element of seriousness. They want you to take it lightly, but I think they took it seriously. I mean, if you understand rituals, ley line energy, I think this was a serious ritual. I don't think it's, and people going along with it and laughing about it, but yeah, that's when the New Orleans Saints got their first ever playoff win. It was after that purification ritual in 2000. So the New York, talking about the New York, New Orleans connection, on December 27th, 2018, in both cities, Kennard, Louisiana, that's a suburb of New Orleans, so it's on the ley line. There was a spectacular explosion. It was described as a cascade of explosions that lit up the night sky. They say as the result of a transformer explosion. And I put there's a video there. The link. I posted a video. You can just click and watch the video. It is a spectacular explosion. It's a series of explosions, and they say they blamed it on a transformer explosion. It shows the power lines, just sparks flying through the power lines, and the night sky just gets lit up in a bluish light. Though later that same day, December 27th, the one in Louisiana was at 3 a.m. On that same day in New York City at 9:12 p.m., the entire sky over New York City lit up blue. I mean, everybody's heard about that one. Now, I think the fact that it first happened in New Orleans, or in the suburb of New Orleans, and then New York City, this has to do with ley line energy. And they also attribute the same culprit, a transformer explosion. Well, you take the term transformer explosions, it's 119, And the official term for the Acadian migration, the expulsion of the Acadians, is also 119. So it's not a 119 when you see New York and New Orleans. 119 keeps coming up. And it has to do with ley line rituals put into that Acadian ley line. So yeah, that's